Hi, how you doing, folks? It's Mitch from Hard Intentions YouTube channel. We also have hardintentions.com where we sell t-shirts and other stuff you might like. Um, I remember when I was sitting in the county jail, I was in a juvenile tank, and then I got moved downstairs to a misdemeanor tank. I don't know why they did that. And then they moved me back upstairs, and uh, I was in one tank, and I remember these guys had these photographs. They're like, man, I don't know where these. Somebody got somebody else's mail, and I saw the photographs of these women. I was like, oh, cool, whatever, I go, what are those? And it was actually Junior from Escondido, a Southsider. And Junior's family was heavily connected in Mexico. He was big time, into drugs and all that kind of stuff. He was a tank captain, and he was a pretty decent guy. Um, I liked him. And he's like, yeah, I don't know where these photographs, I don't know who they belong to, but they came in the mail. And I'm like, all right, he just had them in his locker, trying to figure out who they belonged to. Then I ended up moving into a tank with this guy, Danny, and he had the same photographs. I go, who is that? He goes, my old lady. And I go, wow. He goes, why? And he was in San Diego County Jail. There was a sidewalk, windows. You could yell out the windows. You could see the people on the street, and Danny would yell out the window to his old lady. And so I go, I saw those photographs in the tank I was in before. And he goes, really? I go, yeah. And he goes, who's got them? And I says, a friend of mine, it was Junior. That's another story. But he goes, really? I go, yeah, let me see if I can get him. He goes, who is this guy? And I told him, Junior's he's from Escondido. He's older, older to me. I was 18. He was in his 30s. And I said, he's a good dude. I'll see what's up. I'll tell him that's your old lady, and then I sent word. He was on another floor. So you go through the trustees, and I sent word to Junior. I said, hey, those photographs belong to this dude in my tank. It's his wife, and so next thing you know, boom, they came into the tank, and I gave him to Danny, and he goes, fuck, cool, thanks. And he sent a kite back down, said, hey, this is who I am, blah, blah, blah. Thanks a lot for the photographs. And he's like, hey, youngster, that was pretty cool, and I said, cool, yeah, well, that's your old lady, and so this guy had been in the pen, and I hadn't been to prison yet. Been a youth authority and all that shit, tough guy, teenager. This guy was in his 30s, Um, he lived we lived in the same cell together, along with Daniel Free, my homeboy Daniel Free. He was a Satan's Few motorcycle club. Rest in peace. He was killed in Folsom Prison on the weight bench. But me and Daniel and Daniel Free and Danny were cellies. And I didn't really know who Danny was. I was fighting a murder beef, and I was 18 years old at the time. I just turned 18. I came from the juvenile tank. I got busted when I was 17. And so I'm in a tank with this guy, and it's a pretty kickback tank. And he was very charismatic, always had a smile on his face, always laughing, telling stories. And he was a pretty cool dude. And so um during the course of living in that tank with Danny, I didn't really, like I said, I didn't know much about prison politics. I came from youth authority where white guys all kind of stuck together. It's just like white powder, Holmes, but it wasn't white powder then, it was white power, and white guys stuck together, and white guys fought together, and white guys watched each other's back no matter what. That's youth authorities where you learn the race-based bullshit, the program. So I'm in a tank with this guy, and uh, we would, they have a table, then they have bars, and they have a catwalk, and they have the window. So we would stand on the table and put our hands to the bars and look out the window. and stand next to each other, especially at night, you know, and just chat, you know, and I tell them about my case and you know, I was a kid and I remember the prison gang came up one time in our conversation and we're standing there, you know, got our shirts off, it's hot, and he goes, "Hey, youngster," and he goes like this, and he goes, "You stay away from them motherfuckers." And I go, "Well, you know," I go, "Yeah, okay." And he goes, "I know, motherfucker," and he's pointing to this tattoo on his chest. He goes, "I know, I've been there, motherfucker. You stay away from them fucking guys. They're no good." And I go, "All right." But he's serious, you know, he's almost mad. You know, I never seen him get like that. You know, usually he's real pretty, you know, like easygoing, you know, happy, smile, grinning, laughing. Everything's kind of he just took life pretty casual, you know, but he was upset, you know, because I was talking to him about being in Preston, and he had been in Preston, and I believe in he'd been in Tracy, and he also been in prison, and I mentioned that some of my guys that I've been in Preston with were in San Quentin, this and that, prison gang, woo, and that's when he got really, he looked at me serious, and he goes, and he pointed, and he goes, "I know, I've been there." You know, I didn't really trip on the tattoo, but you know, later on, I saw him in the day room. We have a shower, you know, come out of shower. He had Aryan Brotherhood tattooed across his back, and he had a shamrock with AB and 666. And so his handle was Danny Dog, Danny Rollinson. And so I go, okay, this guy, you know, he's a shit, you know. And I didn't say nothing, you know. And I finished my, I think he left or I got transferred out of the tank. But the whole time I was in that tank, man, we became pretty tight, man. And you know, he told me stories, you know, about prison and about life after prison. And so he was in a prison gang, you know, and he was mad about it. You know, I think he was in a prison in the 60s, 70s, you know, at that time. This is in 79. He told me stories about getting out of prison, I think on bail or on appeal or some shit. And he got in a car in San Diego, and he did robberies from San Diego to the Canadian border of Washington. He robbed everything he could possibly get away with, all the way to the Canadian border and all the way back to San Diego. He did robberies. And he said, I said, "Wow, man, you get a lot of money." He goes, "Yeah, what do you do with these?" I sent it to my friends in prison. So he sent a lot of that money to his buddies in prison, you know, at that time, you know, because that's when he was still in a prison gang. And you know, Danny liked to shoot heroin. Danny was a heroin addict, but he was a heroin addict, gangster, you know, and you know, I knew some guys on the street that were in bike clubs and guys that weren't. They were just bikers, and they were thugs, they were gangsters. But you know, I never thought about doing a robbery before in my life ever. I thought about it. I thought, you know, if you pull a gun, say, "Give me your money," and the guy doesn't give you your money, give up the money, right? What are you going to do? You're going to shoot him? I thought, well, you know, shooting somebody over money is not my game. Money's not worth killing over. But some guys that do that, you know, I asked Dan, and he goes, "Man, it's a fix. It's just like getting loaded." I guess the adrenaline rush of robbing places is, you know, it's addictive. So anyway, you know, he told me stories about being in Tracy. Uh, he was in Tracy when the tennis shoe war started over the Northerners and the Southerners, prison gangs, and that's when the division really kicked big. You know, was fighting over tennis shoes and over a pair of tennis shoes, and you know, he was in Tracy, he was in San Quentin, and he was in Folsom, and around 1977, somewhere around there, you know, he quit, and so he didn't drop out. Um, Dropping out is a process of raising your hand, telling the staff that you're done, you want to check in, and then you have to debrief, which I'm assuming entails telling everything you know about your prison gang, about your activities in the prison gang. I asked the sergeant one time, how does a confidential informant become a reliable informant? He says, well, they have to tell on themselves first, and then they're reliable. I said, wow. So dropping out is a process of telling on yourself, which you get immunity from, I imagine, and then telling everything you know about everybody who's still an active gang member. That's dropping out. And you get to protective custody and so on and so forth. Danny didn't drop out. Around 77, I believe he quit. He walked away. He was in Folsom, and he told me that he got out of 4A, which is a hole, and somebody told him, hey, we want you to kill this guy. And he said, I'm not killing shit. Matter of fact, fuck, I'm done. And I think he had 6 months left to go home. And he stayed on the main line for 3 or 4 months. And then he went out to the firehouse, and then he went home. And while he was on the main line still, the guys would attempt to, hurt him, try to kill him, I imagine. And he would dispatch them. He would deal with them. And I guess, rest in peace, one of his friends, former prison gang brothers, he told him, hey, man, why don't you just come and deal with me? Why don't you quit sending these fucking lames, and why don't you come and get me? And I think that was Blinky he told that to. He said, hey, Blinky, why don't you just come and kill me? Why don't you? And he said, and Blinky told him, man, Danny, why don't you just check in? And, Danny wasn't the check-in kind of guy, but yeah, he told Blinky, why don't you just come get me? Quit sending these fucking lames after me. So he paroled, and then, he was a gangster. Danny was a gangster, but he wasn't a fucking asshole. So when he was out, he got busted, and that's when I met him in the county jail. And I never forgot, I know, pointing at his tattoo, I know, stay away, and I didn't really understand it until I got to prison, and I seen the prison politics, and not just with his crew that he was formerly associated with, but guys that would claim to be associated with that crew. How people, if somebody was doing good, with financially, with drugs or some type of illegal activity or hobby, or just doing good, people would politic on them and try to kick dirt on them and try to use them, and so then the things that he told me in the county jail clicked. I started seeing it. Things he told me, I started seeing. I'm like, all right, So basically, he was the first guy that educated me about prison, and I wish I would have listened harder, because I didn't really get what he said until later on. But there was a guy when Danny was in. When Danny was in Tracy, years ago, this is in the 60s, the whites from San Diego had a policy when I went to prison. Most of the white dudes from San Diego, if a homeboy joined a prison gang, he was no longer a homeboy. We basically, hey, what's up? No disrespect, but we just cut him loose from the homeboy car. He was no longer a homeboy, because his homeboys now were his comrades in prison gang. And because when Danny was in Tracy, for whatever reason, it was kind of trivial. He stabbed a guy from San Diego. Um, you know, I met the guy he stabbed later on. He was still on the main line, but Danny had stabbed a guy from San Diego, and so that kind of created a thing with a San Diego car. And mind you, this in the '60s, '70s, which is still kind of around when I went to prison. That so if a homeboy joined a tip, he was the tip member. He was no longer a homeboy. So that was, because of Danny. Danny was a stabbing him up machine. At one time, he put in a lot of work. But when he was in San Quentin, Bobby Bouzoulet was there. There was also a guy named Steve Kessler. He was from Oregon State Prison, and he was like a white revolutionary. And so Steve Kessler was going to kill the warden at Oregon State Pen. And so Oregon had a policy with California. So basically, Oregon State Prison had inmates they could no longer handle. They sent them to California because California was a rough and tumble. They had animal control at 4A. They could lock you up and deal with you. So Steve Kessler was in California in San Quentin, and he was running around with Bobby Bouzoulet, from what I understand. And there was a guy they called Batman, and I'll spare you his real name. He's passed away too, but they called him Batman supposedly because he used to run from conflict. But when I knew him, he the average guy he would deal with. I imagine he was a lot younger then. So anyway, he was having a problem with Steve Kessler, and it was over Bobby Bouzoulet. From what I understand, they were trying to pressure Bobby, and Steve stepped up. And so Danny walked up on the situation and said, "Hey, what's going on here?" and said, "None of your fucking business." And he said, "Well, that guy's my brother. It's my business." He got involved, and Danny got stabbed like 27 times. He told me he had a bunch of plugs in his lungs. And he died several times on the operating table in San Quentin after that stabbing. So Danny was a fucking warrior. He was a fucking hog. And then later on, I was in prison, doing my thing, but I would always hear about homeboys, and I would ask questions about, hey, who's from San Diego, who's from the motorcycle clubs, this, that, and the other, and different prisons. Like somebody would show up at a prison, and I'd be like, hey, what's going on down there in Soledad? Oh yeah, it's cool, whatever. And so in the mid '80s, Danny was in Soledad in the '80s, and Soledad Central, and he walked out on the yard, went up to the table of white dudes playing pinochle that were supposed to be, the guys. Slapped a couple knives on the table and said, bone crushers, and said, if anybody's got a fucking problem with me, let's handle it right now. And they looked at him and said, "No, Danny, we don't have a problem with you." And he says, "All right." And he let it be known, that if he felt, that somebody had a problem with him, any back talking, behind the back type shit, he would deal with it. And, coming from Danny, that meant he would, somebody was going to be going to the morgue. and yeah. So later on in life, in the early '90s, I went to Donovan, and I kept tabs. I kept hearing about Danny this and Danny that. And he has relatives that married some people from motorcycle clubs, and so people from motorcycle clubs in San Diego would tell me about Danny. And that's the way it is, when you got a homeboy that you care about and you like and you got love for, you ask people, hey, how's so and so doing? So I would ask people, hey, Danny, and they'd say, yeah, how's he doing? Oh, he's doing this and that, and so I went to Donovan, and around '95, I think, Danny showed up on the yard, yard one, Donovan. Danny never checked in, you know. So we're on the yard together, you know, and I go, "Hey, Danny, remember me?" He goes, "Fuck yeah, I remember you," you know. And man, you know, you're still in prison. He couldn't believe I was still in prison because he knew about my case. He goes, "I thought they would have let you out because you know you're not the guy that did that." And I said, "Nah." I go, "Danny, I'm probably never gonna get out, bro." And he was like, "Man, that's fucked up," you know. And I go, "Yeah, you know, it's fucked up." But we play handball together, walk the track together, and you know, he had that rocker tattooed on his shoulders, and he goes, "Hey man, when you get out, they tattoo me." I go, "What do you want?" He goes, "I want a coffin with Folsom Prison in the coffin. I want to cover up that with clouds or what." I go, "Yeah, I'll do that for you," you know. And I go, "But Danny, I'm probably never gonna get out, you know." And he's like, "Man, you're gonna get out, you know, trip." And so while we're in the yard together, you know, Southsiders had a big homie in the hole. And so what they would do is they get a club, well, then they got to go see their homie. So they would jump on some white dude, some lame, average white dude. They'd jump on him, get busted, and go to the hole, report into their big homie. This happened like 3 or 4 times. And I was like, "Hey man, what the fuck's going on?" Because that's when I was kind of starting to detach from the bullshit, you know. I hadn't quit using or selling dope, but I was like, you know. So finally I told Danny, I said, "Hey bro, these dudes are going the hole to report to their big homie by jumping on white dudes. They're jumping on these white dudes. I don't know who gave them permission to do this because some of these dudes are acting like it ain't no big deal. But it's a big fucking deal to me. And some other guys, we don't like, you know, you got another race jumping on white dudes for whatever reason. It's bullshit. You can't let it happen." And he goes, "Really?" And I ran it down to what was going on. And he goes, "All right." He goes, "Come on." And he goes, "What do you want to do?" I go, "I want to put an end to it." And so Danny went up to shot caller. I was with him for them dudes, and he was going like this, and he poked the dude in the forehead a couple times. He goes, "Check this out." He told him, you know, "These guys are jumping on these white dudes, blah blah blah," and he's poking him in the forehead. And he goes, "If this shit happens again, I'm gonna fucking kill you." And the guy told him, "What'd you say?" He goes, "You heard me. I'm gonna kill you." And you know, for whatever reason, it never happened again. But you know, he went from being like, "Hey, you know, let's play handball," to, you know, "I'm gonna kill you." And it never happened again. Um, yeah, he was about the shit, man. And you know, he's passed away since, but you know, the last part of his life, you know, I heard some of the guys been to prison and on the streets now, younger guys, they would refer to him as dead man walking because he was, you know, he had quit. He didn't drop out though, and he wasn't a fucking rat. He was a gangster uh, to the end. And one of my other homeboys would tell him, "Yeah, well, you know, you can say that, but if you run across him and try and do something, you'll probably be the dead man." Because even as an older man, Danny knew how to fight, and Danny had no problem with weapons, and you know, nobody was able to fulfill that. You know, Danny died. I I don't know exactly what he died from, but he did not die from violence. He died natural death on the streets, um, and yeah, he was a gangster till the end, and I miss him. And he was a good dude. He gave me some good advice beyond what I mentioned here. Both times in prison and on the county jails, and I just wanted to give a little video tribute to Danny Dog Rollinson, um, an OG gangster from Dago who gave me some schooling and was a friend of mine. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is because you have these other guys like you know, Dances with Wolves, says he was, you know, big time leader and all this other crap. Danny was a leader. Danny was a man amongst men. and a leader. And these other guys drop out and maintain their they verbally maintain their status as tough guys who have no problem with violence and killing and all this other shit. But yet, when they quit, they became informants. They fabricated stories against people. They testified against people falsely. They bore false witness against people. They got people convictions. And, they lived out the rest of their life in comfort in a protective custody housing, where they were safe and they could maintain their persona as a reformed tough guy, killer, or in some cases they claim they were not ever killed anyone, which is a lie. They fabricated a whole new persona for themselves as men of violence who are now whatever. But and then of course dropping out or just PCing up. If you're just not you're not a dropout unless you're a gang member and then you quit and PC up, then you're a dropout, and then you're also an informant and a liar, fabricator of false information. Danny didn't do that. Danny stayed on the main line when he first quit, and after he went back to prison a few times after he quit. So he was not a dropout. He was a guy who decided to quit and let it be known he was quitting, and stayed on a main line, stayed in general population in prison, and on the streets, didn't hide, lived his life. And was a genuinely good dude, for real. I just and so that's why I want to do a tribute to him, because he deserves it. He was a good man and a decent guy, and he cared about me as a person. He cared about several other people I know of. And rest in peace, Danny Dog Rollinson. Prime example of, you don't have to run and hide when things get rough. You can stick it out. And when things are rough, and I've said this before, your mind will try to convince you that things are worse than they are, and it's going to be some kind of big catastrophe that you might not survive. But in reality, guys like Danny Dog are proof that no matter how bad things get, you can survive, and you can, chin up, chest out, right? Yeah. Rest in peace, Danny Dog Rollinson. I miss him, and get out there and do it hard, people. No matter what kind of controversy you're facing, do it hard.